Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to go over a quick, easy, and semi-professional way to paint your motorcycle tank. So let's get started. Okay, so what we have here is a mid-80s Yamaha tank. I don't exactly know the model of it, but the customer brought this to me and wants it painted with a metallic gray color. So as you can see, it's already semi-prepped. It's been sanded down. The customer asked if there's anything they could do to help speed up the process because I've been pretty busy lately. And the first thing I said that they could do that would be very helpful is I told them to go over the entire thing with 400 grit sandpaper. The reason I chose 400 grit is because it's hard to make gouges that would ruin the paint job and stuff. It's enough grit that everything can get a good matte scuff on it and we can readhere paint. So I said semi-professional mostly because we're not going to be doing this in a booth. There's going to be a couple things that some people might say they should go a little further, like some people might say you need to strip all this paint off the tanks, and we're not going to do that today. We're just going to make sure that there's no edges that are lifting, so we're going to blend all those edges into the steel to make sure it's good even edges so that nothing will delaminate, and we're going to get started. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give these things once over, and you notice there's just a little bit of areas here that aren't, a little bit of rust in here. We're going to get rid of all this rust. Make sure everything's scuffed up good, and start our primer stage. So, I used a stainless steel wire brush to get down in the cracks, get some of that rust cleaned out in those areas, and then I also used assortment of Scotch-Brite tools and power tools, and I can put those in the link in the description below. You can do this by hand, but I'm just trying to speed this up and not make this video long. So let's get on to the next stage. So for the next stage is primer and prep for that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to wipe this thing down with some acetone or degreaser, and I'll probably put some gloves on so I don't get my oily fingerprints on it. Make sure that is all clean and ready to go, and then I'm going to mask off our openings on the top and bottom where the petcock goes, and our lid, so we don't get paint down inside the tank. And then we're going to get primering on this thing. Since we did not strip this thing all the way down, the areas that are bare metal, we want to use a self-etching primer. So I'm going to do that first, just on the areas that the metal is exposed. It doesn't need it on the areas that have paint on it already. And then once all that is done, we're going to go over it with this 2K urethane primer. And this is a high build primer. It'll fill in any pinholes. It works really good to be able to block it out. Makes a beautiful base to shoot your paint over. So we're going to do that after we do the first stage of primers. Okay, now that we have that all masked off and our etching primer down, I only primed the areas that there was bare metal, which was several spots in the tank. Ended up getting dusty on a little bit of everything, but we're going to let this cure and do our 2K primer next. And primered. We got our 2K primer on. I think I lost the video of it, so here she is done. Next step we're going to do is we are going to take some either 320 or 400 grit sandpaper. I used the sticky back on check foam, and we're going to block this out, see if there's any dents in it. And since we didn't do it in the booth, there's a little bit of dust here and there in that. We're going to block all that dust out so we got a nice flat smooth surface to lay our paint down on. So let's get started. I found one dent in it right here, you can see, and I use this stuff. I love this stuff. It's Glazing Spot Putty. Put the link in the description below. But it's a Bondo product, and it's a one part, dries on its own, but you only want to use it for things like 1/16 inch or less. And I found this really light dent that you could hardly feel, and it was perfect for filling that up. You just put a little bit on, works good for pinholes also, and you can paint right over it. It doesn't absorb a whole bunch of paint. So highly recommend this stuff. It's great to have a little tube in the shop. Let's get painting. Okay, so we got our first coat. We're going to shoot our second coat of paint here, and then we'll do some clear coat. I'm using a single stage Summit paint, and if you like the color, there's the part number, so let's get going. We have it. We got a couple coats of paint on it. This is a single stage, so it does have a nice glossy finish, and technically you could leave it at this, but I always like to put a couple coats of clear on just as redundant protection. And also the clear, you can wet sand it out and polish and buff it and just come up with a glass smooth finish. So we're gonna throw some clear down. Okay guys, so another day obviously. What we've done here is we've started out with some, actually I started out with this pad which is 600 grit, then went down to 8, then we went down to 12, now we're at 4,000 grit. We're gonna get this thing all polished out, and then we're gonna hit it with the buffing pad. The important part. So when you get down to your 4,000 grit, you want to make sure that there's no shiny stuff. You want a good matte finish. I mean, it's shining, but I don't know how to explain this. You want this thing smooth as butter. No ripples, no orange peel. Now we're going to break out the buffing wheel. Okay, now you want to get yourself a cheap Harbor Freight buffing pad. I don't prefer the rotary ones, and I like to get a cheap one because you're going to get it gooey and nasty anyways. Nicer grinders, you're just going to mess them up. So, start with the wool pad. I like using Meguiar's personally. They got good quality buffing compounds. It honestly doesn't matter which one you use. I'd use a finer finish one because you've already done a lot of fine work. Buffing out with your 4,000 grit. Let's get polishing. Okay, we're going to call this tank done. I just wanted to go over a few things that I believe are have-tos and not have-tos for doing a decent quality paint job. Number one, you don't have to have a paint booth. You can do this in your garage. You can do this in the backyard. The important things are make sure you got a fan so you got airflow. Make sure you wear proper respirator and safety gear. Make sure you wet the floor down, whether it's in your garage or out in the lawn or whatever. That'll help from kicking up dust, getting in your paint job. You're still going to get some probably, but it definitely helps eliminate it. Number two, you don't have to have a fancy paint gun. I've done paint jobs like this with Harbor Freight $8 guns. You can spray it just as well. A nicer paint gun does help, and this isn't even a good one like a Double Vista or a Wada. This is still like a $40 gun versus a $10 gun. You don't have to have a $400 gun to make a super nice paint job on a tank like this especially. Number three is paint. I do recommend using a decent quality automotive urethane, but if the budget doesn't allow, don't let that from stopping your project. I have also got really good paint jobs with Rattle Cat in your base coat, but you do want to use a good automotive clear coat to seal everything up and make sure that you can polish and buff it out. And when you do that, you want to get a good, especially if you're using a cheaper paint underneath, you want to use a good 3 or 4 coats of clear so you have room to buff that out without getting down into your paint. Number 4, finishing it. You don't have to sand it all the way down like I did, but you're going to get a much cleaner finish. You always get dust and stuff here and there. Even if you have a paint booth, you're going to get little flecks of stuff in that clear. And if you can go down and get yourself some 800 grit, then 1200, then a 3 or 4,000, and then use a buffing and polishing compound and get that buffing sponge on there and buff that out, you're gonna get this beautiful finish, and like this is glass smooth, so no scratches, no swirls. This is a professional paint job. And with that, we're gonna call this tank done. Thank you guys for watching very much. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a like, and go build something. Enjoy.